All right. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for Meet the Author. This is January's book, which is, and I have it right here, Disappearing Earth by Julia Phillips. And we are very, very lucky to have the author with us tonight to talk about her book. And we've received so many questions about it. So I'm very excited to get into some of the nitty gritty, if you will, about the book specifically. But let me introduce you quite briefly, and then I will ask you to expand or elaborate really on the introduction and how you got to where you are now, having written this book. Julia Phillips is the debut author of the internationally best-selling novel Disappearing Earth, which was a finalist for the National Book Award. A Fulbright Fellow, Julia has written for the New York Times, the Atlantic, and the Paris Review. She teaches at the Randolph College MFA program and lives in Brooklyn. So Julia, how did it all happen?
I like that question. I like hearing you read that bio, which I just, you're the first person to test that out. I just changed it a couple days ago. So tweaks to come, but that makes me so happy to hear. I don't know. That's a great question. And I don't know. I don't know how I got so lucky as to be able to talk with all of you about this book and, make things up and then put them into your hands. That seems very miraculous to me. And I don't know how it all comes to be.
Well, can you take us back to how you got into writing? Because you wrote before you wrote this specific book, correct?
Definitely. Yeah. I always wanted to be a novelist. I was and am a big reader and a big fan of books. And since I was a little kid, I thought, if there are people that write these things, I want to be one of those people. It just seemed really special to have a life surrounded by books. So I wanted to write novels specifically. I love fiction. And for a while I worked in publishing. That was also a way I thought I could be around books. But after a while for me, it started to make it not possible for the writing to happen when I was editing other people's books. And so then I started just copy editing. And for a long time focused on that and worked on this manuscript, worked on another manuscript and plugged away. Yeah. Writing's always been the dream for me. And so this is definitely a dream come true.
Well, we are very happy that you fulfilled this passion because this book was phenomenal. We read probably two psychological thrillers, is really mystery / psychological thriller. And your book, actually, if you go on Goodreads, it does come up as a mystery. It's not my favorite genre, but I love women's fiction. So I was so pleasantly surprised when I got to read your book, because it's not at all what you expect when you're going in sort of to the month in the genre of like psychological thriller. It's completely different from that.
Oh, that makes me happy. I'm always chasing, for me, like a literary thriller is my favorite genre to read, but what that means, I still don't know, even as a huge fan. But that is definitely what I'm chasing, I think, in my writing. I like it when there's a question at the beginning and then we try to answer it by the end. I think that's a fun way to read a book.
Well, and that seems right to me, literary thriller. That like you nailed it on its head. Okay, so let's go back to Russia, because your book is set in a country that not a lot of books are set. And I know you got a Fulbright scholarship. Can you walk us through that and spending the year in Russia and kind of uncovering this land?
Yeah. I love the way you put that. I always wanted to be a writer, as I said, but I had this interest pretty much from middle school on in Russia and Russian language specifically. When I was in 8th grade at summer camp, I had a crush on a Russian American camp counselor who spoke a little Russian, and totally lost touch with that person immediately. Was like hardly ever in touch with them in the first place. But I think I was just at an age where I was really open to influence and kind of trying to figure out what I liked and why I liked it. And I don't know about all of you, but I find it still, the music I listened to then, or the books I read, or the movies I watched have remained these huge influences in my life. And definitely just happening to cross paths with, a Russian speaker in this moment was a big influence on me. I tried to study Russian in high school and then studied it in college pretty intensively and spent some time in Moscow studying abroad. And as I got ready to sort of take the next steps after my studies, I thought, well, is there a way to combine this kind of intellectual pursuit of studying Russian with the kind of creative and professional pursuit of writing? And I thought, well, if I set a book in Russia, then maybe I can kind of kill two birds with one stone there. And so I started to apply for a Fulbright grant, which is this U.S. government grant to support projects in many different areas. And one of those is the arts, is creative writing. So they'll fund you to move to another country for a year and write, or, do whatever, really. We had really so many different interesting people in our year, our Fulbright year, of people who were studying tuberculosis in Russia, or people who were, scholars of poetry, or in the archives, like looking at the prison system. They're just really, really fascinating stuff. And I was very lucky to go to Kamchatka and start working on this book. I didn't know at that time what the book would be. I knew about Kamchatka and knew it was a place I dreamed of going, and a place that really looms large in the imagination, I think, of folks that study Russian and play Risk and are into the things that Kamchatka offers. And when I went there, it was such an isolated place, and I was so isolated, frankly. I thought I would go there to find these faraway stories, and I found that really so much of what I wanted to write about was everything that I brought with me. That I was there as this young foreigner, a woman with no friends and no network, and really completely out of my depth, and really ignorant of a lot of different things. And I kept thinking about what a vulnerable position I was in, and how scary that was for me a lot of the time, even though everyone I met was incredibly generous and hospitable and wonderful to me. I spent a lot of time being kind of imagining what could go wrong. And I think the book became those imaginings. That's how the plot sort of came to be. Oh no, Erin, I lost you.
I'm muted. I do that. I'm wrestling around. In what you just said was really interesting to me, because you talked about having met a Russian speaker and that having such an influence on you. And it's kind of like this moment in time that later down the line actually has a big impact on your life. And I read an interview with you, and I wonder if you'll share the story with the girls, but you had a neighbor that was picking you up from school because something had happened with your mom. Can you tell the ladies about that?
It's so funny because this was like such a routine. It's been really interesting that only after I wrote the book and it came out did I understand a lot of different ways of thinking I have, or things that interest me. Or it's only in talking about them afterwards with folks that I understand, oh yeah, that was something that was interesting, that has interested me my whole life. But I remember very well. So it's like this total non-event that I always remembered, which is that I was picked up from school. When I was younger, I went to, I don't know, I assume this is a thing in many different regions, but where I grew up in New Jersey, I went to aftercare. So at our public school, our public elementary school, after the school day ends, you would stay while your parents were working, and then someone, your parents would pick you up at 6 p.m. or whatever. And one time this guy showed up and said, I'm here to pick up Julia. And I remember thinking, I don't know who this is. And he said, oh, your mom can't come, so I'm here to pick you up. And he was signing me out, and I thought, I don't know this person. And then I was getting in the car, and I remember looking at his license plate. I think I was in 4th grade. I remember looking at his license plate and thinking, if something happens, like, I'm gonna have to remember his license plate for later. Which is like, I don't mean to laugh. It's like, it's a disturbing situation, or it's a disturbing kind of mentality for an 11-year-old to have, I think. he was my across the street neighbor. My mom had her car stolen, and so my neighbor came to pick me up, and I just didn't recognize him because I was a child and I didn't look at adults' faces, I guess. But but it was it. I think one of the reasons I remembered it so well, and one of the things that is very interesting to me, I think definitely in the book, but also fueling the book and just interesting to me as a subject or as a way of thinking, is the feeling of where something is going, something is wrong, but you're also sort of swept along by it, and you think, well, I don't really have maybe as a child, or as for any reason, you think I don't really have the ability or the leverage here, or to object, or to say no, or to say stop. Something is amiss here. I will say now that, like, I'm a new parent, and I very much want to teach my child and my children to feel empowered to say no at 11 years old or 7 years old or any, but that feeling of being a child and of an adult sort of authoritatively saying, this is what we're going to do now, is a compelling moment to me. And certainly in the first chapter, the guy that the sisters accept a ride home from, he doesn't say, hey girls, like, would you like it if I gave you a ride home? He says, get in the car, I'll give you a ride home. He has so much authority to them, just as an adult. And that authority is very compelling. And even if it's kind of not what should be happening, it's convincing. You don't, or at least when I was younger, I didn't feel able to say no, really. And that's interesting to me. And that neighbor is still very nice. He still lives across the street.
Well, I'm so happy that it was nothing more than that.
Yeah, it's totally fine.
Yeah. But it is funny how it stays with you. I very, very randomly, I had a very similar situation, and I remember
Really?
being in the car and remember being like, I have to remember the directions, like which way we turn and when we turn. But I was 10, so
Yeah.
it was also fine. But again, just like, yeah, those experiences.
I guess it speaks to that kind of stranger danger,
Mhm.
messaging we were getting so
Yeah.
much growing up, and
Do
the
not get in the
idea.
car with a stranger.
Yeah, totally.
We have so many questions from our audience, so
Boy.
we'll get into those. I do think we need to address one of the big elephants in the room, and that's the way the book is written. When you start the book, you know that two girls go missing if you read the synopsis on the back, but you don't know that it's going to be a different story in each chapter. Why did you write it like that? Did you always plan on writing it like that?
Yeah, I even before, let's see. The plan at the very, very, very start of the project, when all I had was the setting, and I had to write a project proposal. I knew I wanted to write a book set on Kamchatka, and that was all I knew. I didn't know what the plot would be. I wanted to go to the place to figure out the stories. I proposed having never written a word of it or been there, a thematically linked short story collection. So from the start, and I was like, it's going to focus on ecotourism. I tried to make it sound very official for the Fulbright folks who are considering the application. But I think of that because from the start, I wanted to cast quite a wide net. And because it was setting first for me, I really wanted to show as much of the peninsula as possible to readers. And I wanted to learn about as much of the peninsula as possible. So I didn't want to focus tightly on one person or a couple people's story. I wanted to have a lot of different characters and a lot of different settings and a lot of different backgrounds and situations and possibilities for plots. That to me was kind of a fueling part of the project. When I got there and understood that the story that was most compelling to me was the story of these missing girls, I wanted to retain that kind of broad focus, that wider focus. And there were a couple of reasons I wanted to do that. So as I started to think of it as a kind of novel and stories. Like, so as I started writing, I thought, okay, these are all going to be, again, we have these missing girls, and then we're going to have all these different people who, you know, set up the way the book is set up, 1 month each over the course of a year, different character each time, different woman or girl in their community, and all of their experiences are going to resonate with this experiences of the lost girls. So in fact, as sort of the plot came together, the way I was conceiving of it was a collection of stories that are linked by loss, the thematically linked collection of stories where everyone loses something. So in the first chapter, the girls are lost. And then in the second chapter, we have a character who loses a friend. In the third chapter, the character that goes camping, she loses an antenna on her car. The bear takes an antenna off her car. You know, someone loses their temper. Someone, has a mole taken out of their body. Somebody, and then as we get to the end of the book, we meet the girl's mother, who has lost her daughters, and it's a meditation in that way, a kind of harmony of all these different experiences of loss. I finished the first draft of the manuscript and I looked at it and I thought, the girl's story is actually much more, I would like to see more of that. Personally, I'm thinking about them when they're not there. I want to know more explicitly what's going on. I really want to ramp that up. It had the first draft had the same exact structure that it has now. It had the same exact beginning and end that it has now. It had, the shape was always the same, and the order of the chapters was always the same. But I really wanted that backbone of the girl's story to be stronger. And as I continued trying to tighten the connections there and make those plot connections more explicit, I was really gratified to see that the kind of thematic work that I wanted to do was getting stronger and stronger and stronger with each pass. That the more kind of explicit connections were there, the more implicit connections were there too. That was really exciting to me, and a big lesson, a craft lesson, honestly, when it came to writing work like this. And in the end, what was really exciting to me when I looked at the finished product was that not only in my mind does it show a lot of Kamchatka, as much of Kamchatka as I could fit into 300 pages, or as many things as I could possibly learn. Basically everything I've knew, and even some things I didn't know, I tried to put in there. It also became for me a kind of argument of what violence looks like generally, but certainly what violence against women and girls, what gendered violence looks like. In that there is violence on the page that is very kind of headline grabbing and newsworthy in this community, and very rare. Like the abduction of children by a stranger is extremely, extremely rare, very unlikely, and looms very large in our imaginations. It's kind of like titillating and grabs a lot of our attention. And there are also these everyday violences, or if violence feels like too physical or bloody of a word, then harms or hurts that create a foundation for these kind of more attention grabbing violences to happen. So the harm of the abduction rests on a foundation of people kind of belittling each other or overlooking each other or hurting each other, and in the same way that a whole community comes together to make this harm possible, the whole community comes together to heal too in some way, or to recognize what's been happening and to try to begin to change. And that ended up being for me what the heart of the book really was, and what was most resonant for me in it.
So you talk about the two themes that kind of weave their way through the book. I mean, we have the girls as a storyline, but then we have the gender violence and the loss. And we have a question here from Catherine. Catherine is our Chicago host, and I imagine it came from book club, but she says, what did all the women in the book have in common? And you sort of answered that. But she said that they noticed a theme of desire for freedom and identity as women in the world without as many options. Was that your intention?
So that is so interesting to me. I went to a book club kind of in my neighborhood a couple months after the book came out, and they said the same thing, that they thought that the kind of connecting theme of all the women was a captivity, that everyone was in captivity in some way, and that the girls were sort of explicitly in captivity. And that really blew my mind. I think, to me, that seems spot on. Catherine, the way you put it seems really right. And I don't think I ever named that to myself as I was writing, but also I think that the writing is very mysterious to me. And I find that I don't know what I'm trying to say until after I say it. And the fact that you feel that, I think means it's there. I didn't know that. But I like it very much.
Okay, Marina has a question here, and she says, to your point of loss weaved throughout each chapter, can you speak a bit to the loss in the final chapter? And everybody's read the book, or they should.
Okay, I was going to say, are we?
Because it's going to be a spoiler, ladies. So maybe plug your ears if you. Yeah, maybe if you don't want to find out what happens in the final chapter, then you should sneak away for a minute.
So to me, the final chapter, there's a shift that happens in the June chapter, the second to last, the mother's chapter, where we meet someone who has lost everything, her whole world, and she begins to find what she's looking for after a long search. After the whole year, she's finding, and she's, even as it's happening, even as she's connecting with the people she needs to, and she's getting to the place she needs to go, and she's finally kind of breaking through with the help of this community that she was disconnected from, or ignored, or didn't take seriously before. She's still doubting that it's really going to happen and that it's real. And then for me, in the very last chapter, that short July chapter, is us seeing the girls found. So that is our confirmation that they're found, that we find them as readers. So I can tell, by the way, folks, folks have very different feelings and reactions and interpretations of the last chapter. That was also something I did not understand. That has also been a craft lesson for me. I can tell you how I intended it and how I see it, but I've learned a lot about like what we as different readers bring to the page. And I also, as a reader, brought a certain understanding to a page, and my reading is not more valid than anybody else's, I think. So I can tell you what my reading is. So my understanding of that last chapter is that we see the girls. It's just after midnight on July 1st. We realize that they are alive and that they're in Yegor's home with the cat. By the way, my cat is trying to join in here. And that Lilia is with them too in the next room over. And we hear them as they hear the police breaking into the house to rescue them. So we understand that, like, what was this story of loss is actually a story of survival after tragedy. And that, like, in the tsunami story, for example, the story doesn't just end with, it's everyone disappears and it's done. Like, there's something after that, and it's a story of resilience and survival, and to my mind, a hope after hurt, that we can't necessarily avoid or control whether or not someone is going to hurt us, but we can choose how we heal and come together and persist afterwards. And that can be very beautiful. To me, that's what the ending is. I also have a dear friend who texted me after she read it and said that she thought the ending was worse than death. So everyone has their different feelings about it. And I will, don't, it's up to everybody.
I see Marina nodding her head, and she's actually raised her hand. So I'm going to have her chime in here.
Thanks so much, Erin. And thank you so much, Julie, for being here. I really didn't expect you to answer that question, but I'm so glad you did. Our discussion on Tuesday night was about half and half. People thought, and I thought I was just being overly optimistic, and and they were starting to convince me that no, there was no quotes in the way the girls were talking. They weren't found. It was so crazy to hear that. And then we were like, no, the author's probably not going to give it away. It's interpretation of the reader. And so I'm really glad you told us. It makes me happy. I just wanted to share that.
Oh, Marina, that makes me so happy. I can't even tell you. Also, perfect name for this, but that makes me so happy. And I want to tell you, I had so many different conversations with folks where they convinced me, even, people are like, it's a dream, it's heaven, we're going back a year. It's, this is, they're hearing Yegor come home with this. I'm like, oh my God. And I wanted to tell you all that one of the cutest, maybe cute sounds, a very sweet interaction I had was a woman came up to me once at an event, and she was very excited. And she said, I just want to let you know that I know all of your reviews, said that the ending was corny or not good because it was this happy ending. And by the I don't read I don't read the reviews, so I like those. And she was like, but I wanted to they just clearly didn't understand that it was not real. It was a dream and a fantasy that the mother was having, and it was not real that was happening. And they just didn't understand that was not real. And you wouldn't have done something so cliche, and you wouldn't have had just a happy ending. It was different. It was deeper than that. And I said, thank you so much. I was like, I don't, how wonderful, that's, we all have our own feelings about it. And then I kind of scurried away. But yeah, to me, I wanted to write a happy ending. It's important to me. And I think as I worked on the book, I came to understand that I want to reflect reality, but also argue for the best. I don't want to read a book that reflects the hopelessness that I sometimes feel in the world. I want to write a book that reflects the hope that I sometimes feel in the world. And that for me was this ending.
We have just a note here from a follow-up note rather from Catherine. She said, we all agreed in Chicago that it was a very happy ending. And if it wasn't, then they didn't want to hear about it.
Me too, Catherine, me too. Me too.
I have a question here. It's very specific and it was emailed in to me today. The question is, in our book club discussion, some of us were wondering why Lilia's story was always told through other characters and we never got to meet her directly, especially because this was a story about violence against women, and silencing can be a form of violence. Can you tell us about your thought process about how she was represented?
Yes, absolutely. The representation of Lilia and of her mother specifically, I'm still not sure about, to be honest. Those are the qualities of that's the one part of the book that I think that sits with me or lingers in a way that feels unresolved. So Lily's voice is not in the book directly ever, for, I would say, a structural reason. I did not want to take us into where they are. I did not want to take us into Yegor's house ever. There were two reasons for that. One is that I wanted to hold a mystery where we didn't know what whether they were dead or alive, or what was going on. I didn't want us to know until the end. So it's kind of a simple, I was going to say shallow, but that's a simple reason. The other more complicated reason for not wanting to show where they are is that I really didn't want to, I just didn't want to go to that place. I think all of us have seen a lot and read a lot, and in both the news, in fiction, I think we know what that place is. I think we know what that experience is. I think our imaginations can really fill in that place and that experience. And maybe our own experiences can fill in that experience. And I didn't think I had anything to, I just didn't want to go there for us. I thought, okay, we know that story. I'd like to tell some different stories. And so because the book is set up the way that it is, and everything is in this certain time frame, it's only over the course of this year. And Lilia spends that entire year in that place. I never considered her or the girls, once they were abducted, coming back ever. Now, could the structure have been different? Could like the choices I've made from the jump been different? Could it be more centered around Lilia's voice or around the girls' voices? Or yes, absolutely. But those were the choices I made, and that's why it turned out the way it did.
Okay, we got to get something cleared up right away. We need to know what happened to the dog.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm actually amazed that we've all been together for 37 minutes and have not truly, this is like the right away.
Well, it was the first question, to be fair. I just am asking it now.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that makes Erin, that makes a lot of sense, because I was like, I can't believe we haven't talked about the dog yet. Like, that is it's all I will never ever again suggest endangering a dog in a book, ever. It has been like that. People are like, 3 girls kept captivity in a house for a year. Heard it all before. If that dog has one hair on its body, it's like very intense. What happens to the dog on the page? I think we do not know. I can tell you that in my mind, he, after that chapter ends, does he come home? I do not think he comes home. Is he fine? I think he's fine. He's living on the street. He's doing his thing. She says he's not a street dog. He found his pack. He's chilling. He gets very dirty. He's got, but he's living his life. He's fine.
Living his best.
Now I straight up made that up. And it has, again, it's not on the page. So I really don't think it has more, there's not more evidence for that than there is for anything else. I sometimes get emails from people saying, what about the dog? And I have tried to say to them, listen, I just make it up. You make it up. You make up a story in which the dog comes home immediately and is very happy and he never runs away again. People don't like that either as an answer. like, whatever you want to happen happens to him. Someone told me that they feel that Yegor stole the dog and that the dog is in his house also, and the dog also gets rescued at the end. That's fine. I mean, like, truly, how serendipitous would that be? It's up to you.
Laura has a great question, actually, so I'm going to ask her to unmute and ask you live.
Oh.
Hi, Julia.
Hi.
I really loved your book. I felt like the details were all so really right. I was a Fulbright scholar in Novosibirsk in 2010, and it felt like stepping back into that chapter of my life.
Did you know Alex Tulloch?
Um,
He was the Fulbright scholar that year to Petropavlovsk. Oh my God.
I think we must have overlapped at one point or another, like for the conferences, but I think you get into your city and you're kind of like in your city, and
yeah.
So
How amazing, Laura. How amazing.
So it was a real treat for me to read this book. It was just stepping back into that like chapter of my life. So I just really appreciated it.
That means so much.
But my question was about the book and Russian readers. So have you translated it? Has it been translated into Russian? And how have Russian readers felt about the book?
It actually, I love that question because to me that was the most important. That was the dream. I felt like my wildest dream for the book as I was working on it was that it would be published in English and then be published in Russian, and then I would get to go back to Kamchatka with copies of it in Russian and say like, here you go, you decide, like you can read it or not read it, you can like it or not like it, you can say I got all this wrong, you can say I got all this right, but here it is for you to gauge, because there were so many people who as you know, I'm sure in Novosibirsk, people really putting themselves out to support what you're doing and go out of their way to take care of you and go out of their way to say, okay, you've got this project. Like I'm here, I'm jumping on board. I'm invested in you and in this. And that's such an immense gift to give. And I want to say, here's the result of that. Now you can decide how you feel about it. So the book just came out in Russian last month, and I'm over the moon about that. I'm not able yet to go there with it, but copies have been sent to Kamchatka, and folks just got it around a little bit before New Year's. And so far, the people that have read it are people that made that big investment. People who are friends with me and are not going to say necessarily to me, hey, I'm not a big fan, I don't like this. They won't say, hey, I love this, but they'll say, oh, you did the thing. The evaluation is kind of, I received the book, proud of you for doing the thing. We had this project that we worked on, and now here it is. Here's the result. A very, kudos to you. And also, I've been very, very, very grateful to get a lot of feedback from folks, both in Kamchatka that I know and around Russia, or Russian American, like folks from Russia living in other parts of the world, saying, I like this resonates, this feels good. And also, on page 55, you said that she has to thaw pelmeni, but you don't have to thaw pelmeni, you just boil them. Or like on page 72, somebody scrubs the cow tongue, but you don't need to, you just boil it and then the skin slips right off. And these really, to me, like very Russian examples of just being really straightforward about what is incorrect. And it helps me so much. And it makes me, I keep a running list. A lot of it is corrected in the paperback. It means so much to have that. And that, in like a general vibe where I think my friends in Kamchatka aren't necessarily going to say to me whether they love or hate the book. They will definitely always be honest with me about how it can be better, and they are making it better still. So that's what's going on with the book in Russia. Like, it makes me so happy that it's out there now.
Thank you, Laura, for asking that. We have two questions. They're sort of similar, so I'm going to ask them both. Nicole wants to know if there was, which was the first of the short stories or chapters that came to you, or which is your favorite? And then Catherine wants to know if there was any chapters centering around a woman that didn't actually make it into the book.
So the first one I wrote was the one about the dog. My favorite one that I wrote is the December chapter. Xusha, who's the dancer, who has those two men that she sort of feel caught between. And there was no chapter I wrote that there was really no idea for a chapter other than these, or for a story other than these, because the structure of the 12 chapters plus New Year's was so set from the jump, and I knew what the beginning and ending would be, and I knew that the second to last would be the mother. I had made certain decisions from the start. I didn't have more ideas than the slots I had. I only tried to come up with, one for each month, and that was it.
All right. So we have an interesting question from Joanne. Joanne, do you want to ask it live? She's my Saskatoon host.
Saskatoon, Sundogs.
Hi.
Hi.
It's more of a technical question, I guess. When I was reading it was like, okay, this sounds familiar, And then when I looked up Anna Karenina, they had, Leo Tolstoy had put a list of the characters and the groupings, and then also the sentence syntax structure. You had a lot of phrasing similar to the way he writes, where the comma is, you put a comma and then a phrase in between the sentence. I'm just wondering if that was intentional because it was Russian Kamchatka, or is that your style of writing influenced by Russian culture?
I love that comparison, because he is obviously the greatest. You can't get better than that. Anna Karenina is, I think, one of the best books in the whole world. When I was studying Russian, there was always a great rivalry between fans of Tolstoy and fans of Dostoevsky, and I was a big Tolstoy cheerer on. I never thought about that with the sentence syntax, and I would, to be honest, be whatever influence is there, or imitation is there, I think is from being a fan of Tolstoy's work. But when I think about the kind of technical or storytelling or style influences that, to my mind, are most, that I recognize, or that are most conscious, I really emulate Alice Munro very actively. And Louise Erdrich in the US is another writer that I mean, is just my favorite. I just think she's the most brilliant contemporary American writer. I think she's extraordinary. And the way that she tells stories and the way that she uses language, to me, is, she's the role model. So I don't think of myself as, I don't think of this book or of my style in general as trying to emulate the syntax of the Russian masters. To me, part of the fun, a big part of the fun of studying Russian always, was how grammatically different Russian is from English, and what pleasure there was in that for me as a student of Russian. Always there are a lot of like passive constructions, a lot of word order in sentences. There's so many different aspects of Russian speech and written language that are so distinctly and beautifully Russian to me. And And when I think about writing in English, that is not an ideal that I'm chasing, because it just seems so Russian, so different. I will say that I think you're really spot on about the beginning of the book, the list of characters at the beginning of the book. So I wrote the whole book, the whole manuscript, and was, placed it with this incredible editor. We went through 13 months of edits. It was such an extraordinary experience. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. I mean, we went over this manuscript over and over and over and over and over again. And about less than 2 weeks before it was final, I think we were already in copy edits. She said, you know what? We think here that it should have a list of characters in the beginning of the book. And I said, I don't think that's a good idea. I think that's a bad idea. I said, I think it's going to have a map in the beginning, and then it's going to have this list of characters. It's going to feel like homework, it's going to feel like this really tedious thing that, you want to study and take very seriously. And I don't want it to feel that way. And she said, I really, really think it should have that. I really think it should. So I went actually to the Neapolitan novels, which I had just read. And the way that Elena Ferrante groups her characters, I just took that whole set. I was like, okay, we're going to group by family. I'm going to do exactly that. And that's how it went to press. And afterwards, it has been, I'm so glad she said that, because over and over and over again, people would say, oh, well, thank goodness you have that list of characters in the beginning of the book. And if it wasn't for that list of characters in the beginning of the book, I don't think I would even be able to keep track of anyone. And I don't even know how I would have read it. And I would always say, yeah, it was always there. That's just my brilliant idea from the start. It was totally my editor. And it was so wonderful. And I'm so glad that she did. And I think it is definitely it creates that kind of reference to these incredible classic Russian novels with the nicknames and the,
Well, thanks so much.
Thank you for asking.
It's so funny because I didn't realize I'm terrible at reading introductions and even prologues. I usually just go to chapter 1. So I didn't realize it was there until we started book club. And then I'm like, hold on. So I had a very different experience, but a lot of the girls were saying that, yes, they went back and forth through that thing. And I was almost relieved that I didn't have to. That I could just read it and connect the dots where, but I think that if I read it knowing it was there, it would have been a little bit of a different experience.
I wrote it not knowing it was there, so that makes me really happy.
There you go.
I just saw Marina's comment in the chat, by the way, and I just wanted to say that makes me want to jump up and down with happiness. Marina, that makes me really, really, really happy. Sorry to creep into the
No,
chat.
not at all. Not at all. I have it in a very specific spot, so I can't even read what she's written. So I do have a question here from Carly, and she wants to know, and we are forever obsessed with book covers, so you'll have to excuse us. But
Yes.
This is one of the book covers, and this is the North American one, right?
Yes, I think it's all of North. Yes.
Okay. And
no, that's the British one. Yeah.
This one that's on my computer screen is the British one.
Yes.
Right.
And the one that you have that you showed first is a North American paperback. The North American hardcover is this is the German one, but I have it right. It's pretty much this. It looks like that.
Right.
So similar color scheme.
Yes.
But different.
So we want to know how much influence you had in those, if you have a favorite, and because they're quite different. I mean, in this one, some of the girls said that they thought actually it was an environmental book when they picked it up.
Yes. Yes.
Whereas the one, especially the British version, it's more geared towards maybe that there's something happening with the girls.
Yes. I also have very strong feelings about book covers. I'm trying to figure out. There are definitely some book covers I like more and some book covers I like less. I love the hardcover, the US hardcover. When I saw the US hardcover, I just I cried. That purple and blue, I just think it is so stunningly beautiful. It blew me away, and was an experience where they gave me, it's designed by a woman named Janet Hansen, who has created incredible covers at Knopf. And you know, I keep saying the U.S. hardcover, but right, it's the North American hardcover, I guess, because it's right, of course. And that was, they gave me just enough input to make me feel like I really shaped it, where they brought me in and they showed me basically that cover, but some versions were more purple and some were more blue, and some had a black type and some had white type, and some had a serif font and some had a sans serif font. And then they said, oh, you know, I go, oh, Julia, we really need your input to make our final decisions. And I said, oh, I'm really affecting this. And it made me feel very empowered. But I love that hardcover. And it was hard for me when we moved to paperback to kind of relinquish that, that image, because I loved it so much. But they wanted to, actually, it's funny what you say about it being sort of an environmental book is exactly what we were trying to move away from. The idea that, like, you know, this is, there's a mountain, you know, like this is, and so they gave me a lot of input on the paperback, and that ended up being one of the most special experiences of the whole book. It was so, the paperback is so moving to me and means so much to me, because the cover, the background image, the snow image, is a photograph taken by a friend who's a photographer in Kamchatka. So he's like a Kamchatka, I'm sorry, he's a photographer and a videographer, and he lives in Moscow now, but he grew up in Kamchatka, and we met during my Fulbright year, where we went on this kind of long race together. It was this dog sled race together that took a month, and we were both on it, and I was writing about it and he was filming it. And this is a photo from that race. So that it has these tracks on it of like, very faintly you can see behind the girls there are these tracks, and those are these dog sled tracks. And then they kind of superimpose the two girls over it. And that means so much to me, because when I was working on the book, I would look at his photographs, not only from that experience, but you know, photographs of his from when he was growing up, and images he had shared, and I would think about it and the mood of it and the feel of it, and the opportunity now to look at the paperback and see his work and see that mood kind of like brought back over and over and over again. It just really means everything to me. I also very much like that kind of like blue lilac vibe that they have going on. I promise, it's funny, I'm just grabbing copies of the book off of my bookshelf. There are other books on my bookshelf besides my own book, but they send you a big box of them, and then I don't know what to do with them, so they just sit here in a pile. But it was a really, really, really special experience.
You referencing the library, I was actually like trying to like see what I could see, because my final question for you this evening, we have so many questions, and I'm sorry, ladies, we didn't get to all of them, but my final question for you this evening is, if you have any, well, we heard a little bit about your favorite authors, or those that you really hold in high esteem, but what you like to read, if there's a favorite book or anything you're reading right now that we should know about. We always are looking for recommendations.
Oh, okay. Well, I have 3 recommendations. 2 are debuts that came out the same year I did, so 2019. So that, like, friends that we met through that process, and their books, I just still think about them. You know, read them 2 years ago now, and still think about them. And one I see is directly behind me. So, and then one I just finished reading today, and it comes out in February, end of February. And it was so creepy and good, and I can't stop thinking about it. So the one I just read today is The Upstairs House by Julia Fine, and it's about a new mother, very, very new, and her infant, kind of immediately postpartum, who's being haunted by the ghost of Margaret Wise Brown, the woman that wrote Goodnight Moon. So it's about this haunting, and it's about kind of postpartum psychosis, and it's scary, and it's funny, and it's creepy, and really compelled me. Another book that I really love that is the one right behind me is this one. The Affairs of the Falcons by Melissa Rivero.
Okay.
This is such a good book, and not enough people have read this book. And I think I would say that up until every single person in the world has read this book. I just think this is like the most recommendable, moving, compelling book. It's about this, like, an undocumented woman living in New York City in the 90s who's kind of trying to provide for her family and get ahead. And the work that takes and at what cost that comes. It's extraordinary. And I thought about this third one right in the beginning, Erin, when you were talking about, reading a couple mysteries, and the book Miracle Creek by Angie Kim, which,
Okay.
oh, have you heard it?
We have it. I think it was in one of our votes, actually.
Oh, it's so good. And also, talk about meet the author. She is so charming and funny and wonderful. I mean, like, all three of these writers are. It's really good. It's about this trial after an explosion at this experimental medical facility, and trying to figure out who lit the fire that led to the explosion. It's so good, and really compelling, and like truly a page turner, and also so moving and rich and deep and so good. So those are my three top of mind right now.
Thank you. And I said that was my last question, but Sarah has written a question that I would be amiss not to ask. What are you working on now? What can we look forward to?
So I'm working on a book, a manuscript, very slowly, but I better speed it up a bit. That has some, I think, a lot of similar themes around violence and power and gender and community as Disappearing Earth, but it's that much closer to home, which is nice, because the research required for Disappearing Earth, in terms of actually going to Kamchatka, everything about writing the book was really hard. That was the hardest part. It was really expensive. It took a lot of time. It was very challenging. So I am very glad to have picked a setting a little closer to home now. That being said, I had a baby in June, my first baby, and I found that has slowed me down a lot. Most of what I was working on most of last year was preparing for the baby, having the baby, and then looking at the baby. And he's 7 months old now, and I think I'm just coming out of that. So.
My daughter was born on May 27th, so I'm right there with you.
You're kidding me. Just a month apart. He was June 28th. Wow. Yeah. just a lost year or a found year. It was a wonderful year, but
it was a good year to do it.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, congratulations on the book. Congratulations on the baby. And we look forward to whatever is coming down the road from you.
Thank you all so much for having me. Thank you so much. Like, it just means everything to have you read it and engage with the book. So
well, generous. It was awesome. And you're such a gracious, and like, your answers were so thoughtful. We really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful night.
You too. Take care. Thanks, ladies, for joining us.